So there's a question from social media. It's something that's a little bit left field. I believe it's from a previous week. The question is, Allah has made all our organs and every part of our body so perfect and as they are meant to be, alhamdulillah. Why is it that boys then have to be circumcised? Why is this part of a boy not exactly as it is meant to be? If this extra skin is needed for protection in the mother's womb, why could it not drop off just like the umbilical cord does a few days after birth? I ask this from a mother's perspective, as it is so difficult to see our child in pain. Well, thank you very much for that very interesting question, sister, and something that we're more than happy to talk about.
Absolutely.
Imam Mustafa?
I want to return a question with a question. I'm genuinely curious, as a doctor, you're able to tell me, is the umbilical cord not cut?
Yes, it is.
So, okay, well, I learned something that I was genuinely asking for curiosity, but then there's that it's cut anyway. And then I just suddenly think of the fact that...
it is cut, so the umbilical cord itself is cut, and then the remainder drops off.
Falls off, right.
Falls off,
Okay.
but it falls off as a result of being cut. Yes.
So I learned something anyway, but then I suppose it also serves the point that it requires some kind of intervention.
Right.
And suddenly, I know this is a topic of your interest, but something that came to my mind is the fact that of the 5 things a Muslim should do, one, for example, is trimming your mustache, pubic hair under your armpits. That's still a part of you, but maintenance of your body, for example, like trimming your armpit hair, for example, even though that's a part of your body, doing that is kind of enhancing and refining your body to maintain its hygiene. And so if we do, if you look at the organs, for example, that appear to be unnecessary, it appears to be unnecessary to have a mustache that grows longer than your
upper lip.
Yeah, but then maybe that, I don't know, that God's design is that gives a man discipline. In looking at how is it.
So I really agree with the point. I think what it means is it's finding the use and the utility in the things that God's given you. So I would say that for this mother and I completely understand it. It's a big question that many people ask, because of course the child goes through some form of discomfort, and you feel that you're putting the child through discomfort, and that's actually the point. The point of it is that the discomfort is actually much more for the mother and the father than it is for the child. The child, I mean, I hope anyway, no one really remembers going through
the fact that you don't remember tells you a lot.
Exactly, yeah. So, I mean, but the mother and the father, they've had a child, this gift from God, and it's a sign of the covenant. This goes back not just in Islam, this goes back to Prophet Ibrahim, where the sign of the covenant was the circumcision. Now, of course, we can go into the whole medical benefits, and we have the pleasure and the honor of having a doctor with us. But I mean, other than all of that, we have the obvious understanding that this is a physical representation of a covenant which is made with God. And it's actually quite telling that you, as a mother and father who are responsible for the care and the safety and the protection and the happiness of this child, for the sake of God, you are putting that child through a sense of discomfort, and yourself through that sense of discomfort as well, knowing that this child is a blessing and a gift from God.
Well, there's a spiritual, what you're really talking about there is that there's a spiritual aspect to this. We can talk about the physical aspects in a little while, but there's a spiritual aspect, which is that you're taking an action that has a physical effect as a mark of your devotion to God,
yes,
and as a mark of your inclusion under the covenant that God made with his prophets.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's a very important point. And I think I'm happy to talk a little bit about the medical side of it as well.
I was going to suggest a layman point before you come with your expertise there about the mother suffering, seeing the child's pain. It just suddenly come to my mind of seeing children crying before bath time. I don't know exactly what they're going through, but I'm sure when they're screaming and shouting at the sight
I'm sure you had a bath when you were
of water, that's no little discomfort for the child. But because it's clear that that's beneficial, a mother wouldn't think twice. So I think the real crux of the issue here is what really is being asked is it beneficial?
And also, why?
Right.
Why am I doing this?
Right.
It's not the act in itself, it's why am I doing this? And the answer to that question, why am I doing this, I'm sure you're going to go into in the physical elements later, is quite linked to what you said before. It is the physical representation of a covenant that you're making. It is saying that I am willing for myself and my child to go through discomfort for the sake of the fact that I'm going to listen to the command of God. And so that's what's very important. Understanding any decision, even war is horrific, but when the decision is understood as to why, the why is the important question here. And the why here being asked is because God has commanded it to be done.
And nor is it like a useless sacrifice, it's a beneficial one
Well, it has. It certainly. Now, there are lots of people that actually claim that this isn't true. From what I can tell as a doctor, and certainly from what I've read, and actually, frankly, to be honest, from what I've experienced with patients as well, is that first of all, to go right to the broadest point of it, lots of people nowadays are claiming that that circumcision is a form of mutilation and that it's a form of that it's a terrible thing, circumcision for men. To be absolutely clear, Islam has nothing to do with circumcision for women. It's got nothing to do with Islam. In fact, it's not got anything to do with any Abrahamic religion. That's a tribal practice in lots of parts of the world, or in certain parts of the world, and that actually does damage female function. Okay, so that actually is damaging.
And therefore FGM is completely wrong.
And therefore it's completely outside of the pale of Islam. It's got nothing to do with Islam. And frankly, as a Muslim, I had never even heard of it prior to, I think, when I was in my early 20s and it became a big deal on social media. And people were claiming that it had something to do with Islam. But it has absolutely nothing to do with Islam. In Islam, as in Judaism as well, and as is now common in certain cultures around the world, circumcision is for men. And the reason that it is not, from a physical point of view, an act of mutilation is that the foreskin is not necessary for male urinary, urological, or sexual function. It is not. It doesn't actually inhibit a man being able to father children, being able to go to the toilet. So it isn't an act of mutilation. So then the question is, what is it? So what it is the removal of skin that may have a function, but that function is an excess function. It is not actually required for your base function as a man. And it also has certain effects on making, on the man for his functions, that it makes his skin less sensitive. And that actually also probably has some kind of effect on the man from his general function point of view. Now, there are other very, very important physical benefits to it. For example, it's much easier to clean. It's much easier for a man to keep himself clean because there aren't folds of skin. And so that's very important from the point of view of infection or transmitted infections. We know, for example, medically, that the rates of transmission of infections are lower in communities where men are generally circumcised than where they're not. So there are many different things that we can talk about from a physical point of view. And as far as my personal belief and my personal reading of the scientific literature, and I'm sure there are scientists who will disagree, but I've never been particularly convinced by their disagreements. It seems to me to be something that is beneficial medically, and it actually does have a benefit for boys. So
I shared a small point to add on that as well, and the fact that if we understand, again, the why, and we understand the medical benefits, and we've talked about them as well, we would otherwise be circumcising ourselves, or not ourselves, well, we'll be performing circumcision on adults, which of course would be much more traumatic.
And it is much more traumatic on adults.
And so actually the circumcision, which in God's knowledge is something which is beneficial for men, taking place at an age where now no Muslim man can remember when they were circumcised, and yet they're reaping all the medical benefits.
In fact, many men who are circumcised don't even realize that there are men who aren't circumcised because they have no memory of being circumcised. So
actually, it's a blessing in the sense that the children are circumcised, so they reap the benefits without having the trauma of actually going through circumcision. And so in that sense, it's a blessing. And so parents should be getting their children circumcised to reap the benefits and also to avoid the children going through that trauma later on in life.
Right. Thanks. Thank you very much for that very interesting and comprehensive response. I'm glad we had a chance to talk about that. It's not something that we really get asked every day.
No.
So we have
the dinner table.
Yeah, exactly.